is up, gamers? Merry Christmas, happy holidays. I'm so happy to bring this video to you today because I am talking with my beautiful wife, Kristen. Say what's up, Kristen.
Hey, what's going on, gamers?
Hey, so we have been discussing a lot internally in our household. Which Nintendo 64 racer is better? Is it Mario Kart 64 or is it Diddy Kong Racing? I personally, as you can tell by my shirt and the game I am proudly displaying right here, I think Mario Kart 64, based upon my past playing with it, both in college, throughout high school, and even now today, I think it's the superior game based upon my knowledge. But Kristen thought that Diddy Kong Racing was the most superior game. So today we're going to find out once and for all which game runs supreme, reigns supreme, and runs supreme in our household. So why do you think, at a very high level, why Diddy Kong Racing is the better game?
Diddy Kong Racing for me, even though despite it not actually being a sequel, was so much more fun because it gave you opportunities as well as other aspects that have never been in a racing game before. And I thought that that was really fun and interesting to me. The big things that I have to call out is the adventure mode and having kind of this expandable hub world that you can actually explore. Being a big fan of Mario 64, I love that aspect of kind of having this more wide range world. I also love the fact that you can upgrade, it's upgradable weapons. So that was really cool and it helps you strategize when you race more. And finally, the fact that you can play with more than just a car. That was a really fun new aspect of it. I personally love doing the plane levels. Those are really fun. The hover is a little hit or miss, but definitely love that you can use other vehicles.
Those are all super valid points, and honestly, our whole point today isn't to say which game is better, which game reigns supreme in our household. So I think, from my point of view, the Mario Kart 64 is the much more iconic. When you think about the themes, the soundtrack, the characters, obviously, and the one that is more nostalgic. But, I want to go into this being as objective as possible. So today we're going to find out at the very end of this video which game fully reigns supreme in our household. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you like this kind of retro gaming and new gaming content. Make sure to like and also comment below on a video if you liked it, or if you didn't like it, tell us how we could improve in the beginning. And make sure to also ring the bell for future videos so you can be the first to see it. All right, let's get into the video. All right, so our first thing we're going to talk about when we put these two racers head to head are graphics. It's one of the first things you notice when you start playing a new game, and obviously with the Nintendo 64 having the new 3D models, both with the carts, the sprites, and everything in those different worlds within those stages, graphics was such a huge part of it. So let me get into why I think Mario Kart 64 was so iconic. In terms of graphics, you had all your normal iconic Nintendo, both characters, courses, and even like the different, like Lakitu, for example, who was the referee for the entire game. Very familiar franchise themes of the Mario universe, which were just so welcoming, made you feel right at home, and were just so much fun to explore. And while the range of different qualities and characteristics of the specific characters you could select from maybe didn't range quite as much as in Diddy Kong Racing, it was just so cool to rush around the track as Wario, Donkey Kong, Mario, Peach, like any of the different people that you had at your disposal when you picked in Mario Kart 64. What do you think? What about Diddy Kong Racing? Why do you think the graphics are awesome?
So the big thing for me was definitely that just the quality of graphics were really, really great, especially for a racing game. I felt like they didn't try to do too much. Sometimes in Mario Kart races, I noticed that there would be a lot of pixelation, especially with Rainbow Road. Not that that's not a beautiful level and an iconic soundtrack, but your eyes start playing tricks on you, and you're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I guess I'm going to go with the flow. And I did feel like for Diddy Kong Racing, from a graphics perspective, it was much more smooth, and also just the quality of each character. They definitely have a larger roster, which you can start out immediately with, which I think is really great. But overall, I loved the vibrant colors. I love how much detail that they would put into the snow levels or the dragon levels or even the dinosaur levels too. They had deep, warm tones, but they would have aspects of water and just very visually appealing.
Yeah, and I think that even having hearing Kristen go over her preference for Diddy Kong Racing, I think I'm starting to realize, and this is something after we know, I think we went through how many, like 2.5, 3 hours of gameplay for each game, realizing that I think part of my fandom for Mario Kart 64 might have been biased in how much I love the Mario franchise. But in terms of graphics and visuals, it's kind of hard to even compare the two because, when you think about Diddy Kong Racing coming out, was it like 10 months later after Mario Kart 64 and using many of the same different types of features and gaming characteristics that Mario Kart 64 used, but expanding upon them and obviously even more like innovative and advanced way. It's a little hard to compare. I know that when we were going through and racing the different levels, both in battle mode and just like normal racing mode, and definitely multiplayer modes, we realized very quickly that there were parts in Mario Kart 64 that tended to drag on, and it was hard to tell like where you were going when you were going through tunnels. And this is just part of playing games that were 25 years plus old. But I noticed that in Diddy Kong Racing, the colors did seem to be a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more welcoming, and even like when you add the soundtrack in, it was just such a cool and fun experience. So at least from my end, I think this is one place where I can say that like I think the graphics, as much as I love the Mario Kart 64, the playing and the fun factor of it and the iconic franchise, I think I kind of have to give it to Diddy Kong Racing. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what Diddy Kong Racing what they did was they did levels very well, right? They only have a certain themes within levels. So I will give Mario Kart the fact that they had more variety of different levels, right, for each cup. Each level was very distinct, very iconic, and I loved that aspect of it. But I think the reason why the quality of graphics might have been better for Diddy Kong Racing was really along the lines of the fact that they said, hey, we have 5 different stage levels that we're going to do. We want to do it really well. So they really stuck with their theme and it turned out to be good quality.
Yep. And I will be the first to admit when I'm wrong or when I can objectively declare something the winner. So I think for graphics, we're going to have to give the margin of victory to Diddy Kong Racing. So, and also one quick note too is that we're not even talking about the different modes yet, like multiplayer, single player, or even like the adventure mode. So those are all fun things that are sure to come in the next segments of the video. All right, so the second topic we're going to get into in our head-to-head discussion of Mario Kart 64 versus the Diddy Kong Racing, of which one reigns supreme in our household, is character selection. I'll get the kids started with Mario Kart 64. When I first open up that screen, either in single player or multiplayer mode, I immediately get drawn to historic franchise Nintendo characters. When I think about being able to select a character like Wario, a very, very high level, very top end speed, maybe not with the most acceleration, but super adorable, very much loved, even anti hero of the Mario universe. You might even want to call him a villain in some games, right? Being able to select a character like that, you immediately get brought to this nostalgic area in your mind where you're just like so familiar with it, you love it. And even today, as I play new games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch, I'm always picking Wario because of that big cute booty on that on that motorcycle, doing the power slides at will around all the corners and giving me those first places. So of course I like to play with other characters as well. When we think about other characters I like to play with from time to time, I like to diversify a little bit and get into Luigi. I like to get into also Yoshi as well. But I just will always think about Mario Kart 64 in terms of the character selection, about like these characters that you've been playing for decades before this game even came out that you're so familiar and you love. What about Diddy Kong Racing? What do you like about their character selection?
Well, first of all, I love, again, that you can, right off the bat, play with 8 characters, and I think that's pretty cool. They don't have as much of the iconic characters, right, that Mario has, but they definitely give some really cool shout-outs, like Conker, the mischievous squirrel, although he's more of the PG version, not as bad-mouthed in Diddy Kong Racing.
That's a great game, by the way. Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, and Banjo, how can you forget that game? and what Naughty Dog Games did for that franchise. And then I also love the opportunity that you can play and unlock other characters like the Clock from Adventure Mode, TT, or Drumstick the Rooster, who ends up you finding out being like the fastest on the island and gets cursed. So I thought that that was a really cool aspect. And then you have, Diddy Kong Racing, or Diddy from Diddy Kong Racing. So the character selection isn't as well-known characters, but they definitely do a good job introducing everyone, especially doing it right off the bat.
And I will give Diddy Kong Racing the fact that, and this is a huge pro for any video game, is it really brought those characters together in a really thematic and cool way, and it gave them not just like speed and acceleration, but also maneuverability, which I thought was really cool. If you look through the instruction manual of how it ranked their different characteristics and how that would correlate to specific how they would race along the track. So that was really cool. For me, like after our 2.5, 3 hour gameplay of both games, I'm still with character selection. I'm hard nosed. I'm gonna be a little stubborn here, and I'm still gonna say Mario Kart 64 reigns supreme. What do you think?
I'm going to have to give it to Mario Kart as well, just because they have more iconic numbers, and that's something you can't really argue with, right?
Yep. So far we both agree that after playing both games for a very long period of time the other day, that we're gonna give graphics to Diddy Kong Racing, but we have to give character selection to Mario Kart 64. All right, move on to the next one. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about in our head-to-head battle of these two great racers is race type. So obviously with each of these games, you can play either a one-player mode or a multiplayer mode. It's really which the Nintendo 64 was known for. It was known for its multiplayer modes for all this different game. It was so much fun to bring to parties or even start parties. So I'll get started with Mario Kart 64. In the single player modes, you can either race along, you can do time trials, you can do 50cc, 100cc, 150cc races. I always personally liked the 100cc races myself. It was a nice medium speed and also difficulty. And going through the race type as a first player mode, it's fun, but it gets a little bit repetitive. I also think sometimes in Mario Kart 64, having now played through many hours of it with Kristen and really trying to be as objective as possible, I can say it gets a little long in the tooth at times, which is a weird thing to say because there are so many iconic courses within Mario Kart 64, which I love, like the Wario levels, Rainbow Road. Oh my goodness. And it also has introduction of amazing things like the blue shell or spiny shell, as it's technically called. So in going through and evaluating it, it was kind of hard not to realize that Diddy Kong Racing had a better kind of first player mode, especially with the introduction of adventure mode. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, this is where I think it's like a really big differentiator for me is Diddy Kong Racing introduced this adventure mode, which is something that they really didn't have before in racing levels. And that was appealing for me because I don't know about you, but back in the day, I didn't have a bunch of people to play multiplayer mode with. And I liked that aspect of it. And I almost feel like it's a very early beginnings and starts to like games that you see nowadays, like Gran Turismo's that absolutely have like this whole RPG type of style racing mode, which is really kind of interesting to see. But the adventure mode is really cool because it allows you to get better at racing, unlock more levels, even go back and do the levels over again and do different challenges, which is fun. But the other part of it that I really love is the boss battles. And
Yes,
that is cool.
that was really fun.
Yeah, so you have Tricky the Triceratops, which is usually your first boss that you'll have to race up the mountain to as part of adventure mode. You have the Whiz Pig, who's the main villain and character of it.
A wizard pig.
Yeah, Whiz Pig.
Which is really funny.
Yeah, and then you have this elephant, Taj, who takes you around on his magic carpet, which is kind of trippy now that I think about it. And he also is kind of your guide into this more expandable world that kind of gave me a little bit of a Banjo Kazooie kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Definitely a super fun aspect of it. But the boss battles definitely was something that I found really fun and very challenging too. You know, they were not easy to beat, and I think Diddy Kong Racing generally is fairly harder. When it comes to the levels itself from single mode, again, the other aspect I like about it when you're playing by yourself, they just aren't as long, and to me, that's a more appealing part of it. And then we also have the battle modes too, and I think, you know, for me, we always, all of my friends, even like when we were in college, would always prefer the battle modes from Diddy Kong Racing. One, because the music was really awesome, and I know we'll get to more of that in a moment. But I also just loved the fact that, you know, when you upgrade your weapons, the fact that you can make them, they're just more accurate compared to Mario Kart 64. So overall, I think from a single player mode, definitely a better experience. But multiplayer, I could be a toss up. Battle mode, I think I could give it to Diddy Kong Racing because I just think it's more fun, and they give you different types of battles, right? But they also, I think from multiplayer, maybe I'll give that to Mario 64 when you're just straight racing, because it is kind of nicer to have those longer level plays when you're playing against a group of 4 people, because you want every opportunity to try to beat your friend, or Mario Kart, right? That was a big thing.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the
Shout out to our friend Justin Watt for introducing us to Mario Kart,
Yeah.
and Justine Kruger.
Yeah, Mario Kart, and I felt like that was the first of the Mario Karts where people really started playing the Mario Kart. They probably did it before then, but when the original Mario Kart, but Mario 64 or Mario Kart 64 was definitely when it kind of took lift off. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very thorough and awesome opinion. It's hard for me to disagree with any of that. I think when we really look at one player mode, you almost kind of have to give it to Diddy Kong Racing, because having played through it, in all honesty, and coming in with a heavy bias towards Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing was the one I wanted to keep on going back and play as a one player. Just, if Kristen was no longer wanting to play, or if there's no one around to play with, you can keep on going through adventure mode, and there's always something to go back to. It has almost seemingly a higher replay factor in first player mode. And, not just racing against the bosses, but also the different modes and the different, you can even select in terms of the number of options, how many racers you want in each race. You can select between, whether it's a kart, a hover, a craft, or even a plane. So there's all different ways of playing at different levels. And also, too, and we didn't have enough time in the plane to unlock any of this, but there's also apparently adventure too. So even if you go through and collect everything in the first adventure, kind of like first player RPG type of mode, you can then go into another lockable one and play all different kinds of new, not only new ways to race the games, but also new challenges as well. I'm trying to think of the right word for it,
like collecting the coins.
Yeah, and new battle modes as well, which were super fun. Apparently, due to the research I did online, so we didn't actually unlock any of that this time around. So I think in single player mode, I have to give it, and I agree with you, I have to give it to Diddy Kong Racing being objective. But in multiplayer mode, it's kind of a toss up. I agree, because there's just something that's so much fun and so familiar about playing the balloon battle modes in Mario Kart 64, but I need to make sure I give a shout out to Diddy Kong Racing, because in the battle modes there, not only are there right off the bat different types of battle modes, it's not just trying to shoot items at each other to try to get the total life total, or there some kind of reduction to whatever the total amount of points is. But it's also there's banana challenges, trying to collect bananas. There's also different things as well. And also, I would say the graphics and visuals and some of the battle mode levels that we played, it's very easy to fall off the screen. So it's difficult, a higher level of difficulty for not the right reason sometimes in the battle mode in Mario Kart 64 versus Diddy Kong Racing. And also one other thing to note, and I didn't realize this, I guess in my mind, I'm so used to playing newer Mario Kart games on the Nintendo Switch, that I didn't realize this was not introduced until later. But when you play two-player, for example, if Kristen and I were to start up Mario Kart 64 and play two-player battle mode, it didn't automatically have AI carts that you could battle against. It was just us battling versus each other. Now, Of course, if we had two other friends handy and we had the full roster of 4 players, that wouldn't be that big of a problem. In fact, it'd be super fun, right? But if it's just us two battling each other, it's not quite as much fun, not quite as dynamic. Where in Diddy Kong Racing, obviously, you had a full roster of AI combatants, which you could also compete against in battle mode. So that was pretty cool. And then obviously being able to pick between different, not just between the carts, but also between the carts, the hovercrafts, and the planes as well. So I think I can agree with you. In single player race mode, I got to give it up to Diddy Kong Racing because of the adventure kind of RPG aspect and more options. But for Mario Kart 64, I think it's almost a tie because they do both things differently. And if I was in a party and I had 4 people readily available, 4 friends, I would actually pick Mario Kart 64 first. But if it was just us two playing and we wanted to have a better battle mode experience, I'd actually pick Diddy Kong Racing. So how do you think we should do this? Because I think is it a tie or like how?
No, I think this one's Diddy Kong. Just
Yeah,
because if we're saying single player mode, it's Diddy Kong, and then we're saying it's a toss up for multi.
that's a good point.
I
Yeah,
think we get the slight advantage of it, but I would agree with you from a multiplayer perspective. I'm gonna choose Mario Kart 64 Racing.
yes.
All the time over, Diddy Kong for sure. But I do love that battle mode. And once people play it on Diddy Kong Racing, they're hooked just
It
because
was
it's super
super
fun.
addictive and fun. Like I would,
And the music's
yeah,
great. It's
yeah.
like heavy drums, like do 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 do
Yes.
do, and you just kind of get pumped up for it. And I love the aspect like of the levels, that they have, especially the snow one. It's really fun to kind of slide, and it has 3 different levels. And like we were saying, there's other versions of it. Like you can do the one with the hover, which is a little bit of crazy because the hover doesn't have the best controlling. And then they have the banana mode, which is in the Smoky Mountain area. So that's kind of cool to collect the bananas before your opponents. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. So single player mode clearly goes to Diddy Kong Racing. I think multiplayer is kind of a toss up based upon your preference. But since those two things are kind of together when it comes to total race type, I think the slight edge goes to Diddy Kong Racing. However, I want to make an asterisk to that if I'm in a party scene or with 4 other friends, I am reaching for the battle mode of Mario Kart 64 first. But if I'm alone, I'm definitely playing Diddy Kong Racing in that adventure mode. So we'll give the slight edge to Diddy Kong Racing here. All right, so the next thing we're going to debate and talk about in our epic head-to-head match, Mario Kart 64 versus Diddy Kong Racing, is soundtrack, audio. What you hear as you're playing these epic franchise games. And this is kind of a hard thing to say, but as I was playing through both of these games with obviously my lovely wife, playing in first player and 2 player mode, it was kind of hard not to be like captivated by the Diddy Kong Racing soundtrack. Now, I say this with a full Nintendo heart right here, loving all the different various thematic soundtracks, even the visual effects that were just punctuated by awesome details and audio fluctuation and dynamic selection from soundtracks that were composed by some of the world's best video game engineers. But I kind of have to say, I love the Diddy Kong Racing soundtrack. Now, I will say that because I'm just being objective and honest here. But Mario Kart 64, if you're used to playing the one that was originally released on the SNES, the SNES, the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, depending on where in the world you were playing it and you were first introduced to it, there are so many classical tunes that just get you in the mood to want to keep on playing and trying to race for a faster time each and every time. I will say the biggest probably bullet points of why Mario Kart 64 has an amazing soundtrack is it just had its legendary composers be able to come in and continue the trend of just that routine, almost like John Williams-esque what he does for all the various different movies he does. It's just things that you're so familiar with, that you love, that even make it when you fall off a cliff and Lakitu has to come and rescue you and put you back on the course. You just love it. It's just such a fun, positive, awesome Nintendo experience. That's why I liked the soundtrack, the audio, and everything to Mario Kart 64. But I did want to say, having to replay both of these games for a long period of time, I did have to give a huge shout out to Diddy Kong Racing because it was pretty awesome itself. What do you think?
Yeah, just to talk about Diddy Kong a little bit more. Again, they have themed whole levels. And it is really great to see that they had stuck with the theme. And I definitely appreciated that. And the music was fun, lively, it got you pumped up to play the levels for sure. I personally admit, like I mentioned before, love the battle mode music. That's just super
Yes.
fun when you're with a group full of people and playing it. But I do think this comes down to the fact that this is something that the Mario franchise does extremely well. They have a multiple different levels right within each different cup. Each one of those levels has really iconic songs per each level. I mean, the Rainbow Road, still
Yes.
used today
Yes.
versions of that, right?
It's
Or
been
they
remixed.
spin off of, it's really, really iconic and fun. And also just kind of soothing, and as it should be, because it's a very long level. But I definitely think this, when it comes down to it, this is something that the Mario franchise does really well. Even though the Diddy Kong Racing soundtrack is really great, and they stick with the theme, and it's very fun. I just have to give it to Mario Kart 64.
Yeah, like I'm supposed to be the person that's totally rooting for Mario Kart 64 here, but I did not remember Diddy Kong Racing being this good. Like, especially as Kristen described in battle mode, you really get into it and you start to you hear the sounds and you notice someone's either approaching or shooting something at you, or you just scored, you throw out your bananas in like the big box, and you're that much closer to winning battle mode. So I think for me, and this could be, I'm sure, a whole nother video, but when it comes to the course audio, I think the Diddy Kong Racing or battle mode audio, I think the Diddy Kong Racing might have the slight edge. But when it comes over to the overall thematic composition of the music, it has to be Mario Kart 64. And I think that when I think about how I feel when I play both of them, Mario Kart 64 has the slightest of edges here. But I did not think it was going to be this close. I thought Mario Kart 64 was going to blow Diddy Kong Racing out of the water here, but it was actually really, really close.
Well, the one thing that they do that's really fun, and they probably could have done a little bit more of this because this is something that the Mario franchise does really well, is they had aspects of Donkey Kong music in there. And we know that Donkey Kong has an amazing soundtrack.
So good.
I wish it was a little bit more, in honest opinion, but there's lots of percussion. He's a huge fan of ska music, and there's literally tons of trumpets in the first couple of levels. So I know that that's probably why he's thinking he really likes it, especially in the dino levels. Yep. But, they do it really well. I think that they could have marketed a little bit better by having more elements of Donkey Kong. But I understand the way that they did it, because they did kind of want to make each level type very distinct and have their own soundtrack for that. But let's say for this one, we give it up to Mario Kart 64.
Yes. And one quick note, I still listen to ska music in the 2020s. Shout out to the Specials, the Slackers, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, and Less Than Jake. Yes, Real Big Fish as well. So yes, gotta love it. Late 90s and early 2000s were an amazing time period for music. All right, on to our next one.
Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is power-ups and items within each course. Now, for me, with Diddy Kong Racing, I love the fact that you can upgrade your weapons. And this is the part of the game where you can really strategize, right? Where are you in the competition? Are you very far in the lead? So instead, you just want to get a lot of boosters. It's cool because each balloon means different things. You have the red balloons, which means the blasters. You have the blue balloons, which are the, rockets to make you go faster. But if you keep getting more of them, they keep getting better. For example, the rockets with the red balloons. When you get one rocket and it just shoots, straight. Then if you get a second one, it actually locks in, which it locks in better than a red shell, in my honest opinion. So it has like a true lock into a character. So you can kind of hit it, and as long as you aren't running into a wall, you can really get somebody, where you're not super close to. And then if you hit a third time, you get 10 rockets, which is super, super important towards an end of a race, especially when you're playing with a bunch of friends. They also have yellow balloons, which help you get magnetized and like push yourself closer. So I love the fact that you can be able to upgrade your weapons, which is something really cool. Now, the other thing I'd like to call out, which is something that's not an element within Mario Kart, but they end up using it in newer games like Mario Kart 8, is the bananas. The bananas in Diddy Kong Racing, if you collect, the more you collect, the faster you go. And as we know in Mario Kart 8, if you collect up to 10 coins, you actually go faster. So this is elements of this game that now the Mario Kart franchise uses that started in Diddy Kong Racing. So definitely a big fan of that. But what do you think about Mario Kart 64?
Yeah, so power-ups and items are really interesting because they're done very well in each game, but they're definitely done differently. Mario Kart 64 obviously introduced, much to gamers' chagrin across the world, the blue shell or spiny shell. So like a way of really honing in on the rubber band effect, which also, by the way, seemed to be much more prevalent in Mario Kart 64. Maybe it was my imagination playing tricks on me, but the rubber band effect seemed to be much more prevalent and stronger in Mario Kart 64, which, to some players, it's a great and welcome thing if you suck at the game or if you're not doing so well. But the people who like work so hard to be in first, second, or third and are fighting for that, like first place in the Grand Prix mode, that can be such like a kick in like the butt, right? Like when you get hit with a blue spiny shell as you're in first place and trying to barely win a game. But Mario Kart 64 introduced a lot of now iconic parts of power ups and items. It also introduced like the multiple variations of both the mushrooms and then also the red and as well as normal green shells as well. But those were just kind of like, slight additions to what had already been introduced into the Super Nintendo version of Mario Kart. So it wasn't like, besides for the blue spiny shell, it wasn't above and beyond. It's such a drastic effort. Also, too, in Mario Kart, obviously, you don't know what you're getting beforehand. Where in Diddy Kong Racing, you can actually race along the tracks and determine like where you want to go in order to get what color balloon. And obviously, if you know, as Kristen just described, what each of the different colors correspond to in terms of the type of or category of power up, you can actually aim for those and keep on like boosting them up. So if you're doing like really hard level, like having to chase one of the bosses and try to beat them, you can just keep on getting like the blue balloons or keep on getting the red balloons to upgrade that power up to the level in which you can really help yourself out in either the battle or even the racing as well. So I thought that was, again, it goes back to like they both do power ups and items really, really well. I think in Mario Kart 64, it really comes down to it's much more random, and it adds to the whole like almost like luck factor of winning. You feel like if you win a race in Mario Kart 64, you don't have to just be skilled, but you could be like highly skilled and you could get blue shells like two times, and like you could have someone behind you that has 3 red shells. It's just honing in on you. So it's kind of crazy to compare the two.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that for me, Mario Kart 64, in terms, I do love the variety. That's definitely really cool. But really, what I'm looking for is like the main things I always want is I want the gold mushroom, because that gives you a ton of like, what do you call them? Boosts all the time. And then you also have the red shells, which when you have 3 red shells, those are like the 2 main ones that I'm looking for. Obviously, the lightning one's really cool too. But the blue shell, I know it got introduced during this game, but I did not like the trailing effect where it hit everybody going on. So I'm like, come on, it's supposed to go to first place. And that aspect I didn't like. And I do like how it is now in the new Mario Kart franchise, Mario Kart 8.
Yep.
But what I just think it's exactly what you're saying. To me, you could pick up Mario Kart for the first time and play, and you could get really lucky just based upon the weapons. Whereas Diddy Kong, it is really more of a strategy, and it allows you to pick each balloon. You have the red with the rockets, the blue with the boosters, the yellow with the kind of like the repellent or protector, and then you have the rainbow with the magnet. And the other part of that too, which we didn't talk about, and the Mario Kart Kart franchise also uses is the boost on the ground.
Yep.
That is super big in Mario Kart 8 that they totally started in Diddy Kong Racing. And those blasters, boosters kind of make you go really, really fast. And that's kind of a really critical thing to get if you want to win, especially against like, hard mode. So I definitely appreciate that aspect of it. So it's like for me, Mario Kart 64, in terms of power up and items, definitely better if you're a beginning player. But Diddy Kong Racing is for more of those, seasoned racers.
I can't help but agree. It's there's much less of an educational process needed for Diddy, or there's much more of an educational process needed for Diddy Kong Racing versus Mario Kart 64. You could pick it up, and you probably have already, if you've never even played a Mario Kart game before, you can figure it out in 5 minutes, 10 minutes easily, right? But Diddy Kong Racing does need a little bit more introduction. But once you have those specifics down, it's a super fun game to play. The other thing that I'll also bring up too, two quick things, is that I noticed in Diddy Kong Racing, and this might have been just because I was a little bit more not as familiar with it, but you can't really shoot things backwards in Diddy Kong Racing. You can shoot, I think, like the oil slick backwards, but you can't shoot the rocket boosters backwards, where in Mario Kart 64 you can. So like, depending on how you play and how aggressive and how like high end you get with like, what mode you're playing on, that could be a really cool feature for Mario Kart 64 versus Diddy Kong Racing. The other thing also I'll very quickly bring up when it comes to power-ups and items is this: as you go through like the entirety of both all the different course selections for both these games, the power slide in some way, which was first introduced in Mario Kart, is evident and prevalent in both of these games. It seems when you compare the power slide in both of these two different games, and we all know from advanced Mario Kart usage that the power slide is necessary for going super fast, really like understanding how the level is designed and being able to go through it as fast as possible. But in Mario Kart 64, if you're used to playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, for example, it's way more sensitive than you might want it. So like, as you try to go into a curve with someone like Wario, who I always play as Wario, because of what I mentioned before, you almost like come into an immediate standstill stop, whereas like you would want to slide a little bit more when it comes with the sensitivity of like when they introduce motorbikes later in the franchise. So the sensitivity of the power slide can definitely add a whole lot more difficulty to Mario Kart 64 if not used correctly. Now I'll say like the power slide-esque feature, I can't remember I think it's just called braking in Diddy Kong Racing, but it seems to be less responsive and almost like more accustomed to more, like I would say, general use of it going around wider turns. Now, in both of these games, you don't get a boost after doing it for X amount of time as you would in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. As you can tell, I'm used to playing that game since it's such a beautiful game. It was kind of weird going from that game back to both of these because you play them in wildly different ways. But I agree with you. I think if we have to talk about power-ups and items, again, Mario Kart 64 is a much more iconic and legendary franchise when it comes to that. But Diddy Kong Racing was much more strategic, and I think for long-term playing, Diddy Kong Racing kind of wins it here if you're looking to play this game more than 10 hours or more than 20 hours, or even looking to go back to it much years later. So I think objectively, I have to give it up to Diddy Kong Racing. And plus, oh man, it's just Mario Kart 64 is a little bit more random, and that blue shell I'll always hate because I'm always in first place and I end up being in fifth. What do you think?
Yeah, I give it to Diddy Kong Racing because it really is the first of its kind in terms of upgrading your weapon or item of choice, which is really great. Plus, you got the blasters on the ground or the boost on the ground and the bananas that make you go faster.
Yep. So, I told her ahead of time I was going to go in here with an open heart, even though I love Mario Kart 64. So, cool. All right, on to the next one. All right, so at some point we're going to have to come down to a conclusion. But as we go through this head-to-head comparison of Mario Kart 64 versus Diddy Kong Racing, there's a few things to call out that, well, just need to be said. So when we talk about the release of both of these games, obviously Mario Kart 64 was released much earlier in the year in 97, actually right before Valentine's Day. And coincidentally, Diddy Kong Racing wasn't released until about 9 months later, right before Thanksgiving. Actually, I think it might have been on Thanksgiving in 97. So right before that winter holiday and Christmas season. So obviously Mario Kart 64 had not only a heads up in terms of the market and also like iconic franchise. Obviously, Diddy Kong Racing had some franchise characters in there which weren't well known. But a few questions that came up that we probably should answer as we go through this is not just like comparing them head to head and the best Nintendo 64 racer, but also just objectively getting into, do you think, like, why do you think Mario Kart 64 sold more? Because it ended up being, and just looking at the stats here, overall for obviously worldwide sales, Mario Kart 64 is currently in second place, only behind Mario 64, and Diddy Kong Racing is currently in eighth place. So they both did extremely well. But why do you think Mario Kart 64 sold more?
Oh, this is a very easy question because it's Mario. So
Yep,
there's already
it's
been,
a me.
it's a me. There's already been multiple games on, Super Mario, and it sells, and people love going back to playing as Mario. Definitely is nostalgic too for those who had an NES or a SNES, right? So it definitely goes down to that this is a great franchise, and they're going to try to continue the franchise by making more games like Mario Kart 64. So definitely that is the reason why.
Yep. And just to add on to that too, I think what Nintendo does so well is it mixes all its different characters into like one unified, engaging story throughout. So you can pick up any game, instantly recognize the characters, and probably have insight into how that character is going to perform, or even be utilized in a dynamic environment within a Nintendo game. So yeah, I agree with you. Also, it had 9 months advantage, which actually leads into my next question, and just to state it openly, and everyone feel free to jump in the comment section and say what you think as well, not just our opinions. But do you think Diddy Kong Racing would have done better if it was the one that was released first?
Potentially, I actually think it came out during a prime time. I guess if there was no racing game for the N64 like this, right, with a car, right, you had other games out there, right, where you're a spaceship or something of that sort. But with cars, sure. But I did think it came out at the right time, right? Prime time when people are buying presents during the holidays is during Thanksgiving. So I think it had a little bit of advantage. But yes, of course, given that the fact that the system didn't really have a really popular race car game.
Got it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And then the last question I'll ask before we reveal which one reigns supreme in our household is ultimately which one is more fun to play in first player and as well as multiplayer mode, in your opinion?
So for me, obviously, I'm the one kind of advocating for Diddy Kong Racing, and I still have to stick to my guns that I just love the game. Again, adventure mode, having those boss battles really made it a differentiator for me. Then having the fact that you could strategize, right? Once you get into the groove of multiplayer mode and you play with a group of friends often, you really have to think about how you want to select your balloons or what you want to do next. And I love that it takes it to the next level of being able to kind of, upgrade your weapons or items per se. And then finally, for me, 9 times out of 10, when I would play Diddy Kong Racing in multi-mode with friends, it was always the battle mode, and I just think it is the superior of them. I'm personally a huge fan of battle mode, and those are the biggest things for me, I think. And
Yep.
I have to give it to Diddy Kong Racing. But I will give a complete shout out to Mario Kart 64 because Mario Kart is not the same. You cannot do it it as well.
There's
You can do it in Diddy Kong Racing, but it's too short of levels.
There's no Kong Racing.
And it really is fun to play some of the longer levels that aren't as a headache or like pixelated, crazy, thing in your face and you're going cross-eyed. It is fun to play some of those longer levels with your friends because it gives you more of the opportunity. But like we were saying, you definitely could get screwed over just based upon the weapons that you have.
Yep, 100%. I think this has been very eye-opening for me because it's one of those things where you think you come in with a certain bias and you think that just obviously Mario Kart 64 is going to be like above and beyond anything that Diddy Kong Racing ever achieved. But going back and objectively now, like now that I'm in my 40s, playing both of these games that are well over like 25 years old, which have to have a lot to be said for retro gaming in general because they've paved the way for so many new racers and like not just battle modes, but single player adventure, more like RPG style games that fell also within the racing genre of gaming, just have absolutely blazed a trail for them. But going through this, I want to give a shout out to you, Kristen, for coming up with this idea and really just pitting them both against each other and then just playing it out in every which way we possibly can. I think for first player mode, I have to give it undoubtedly to Diddy Kong Racing. That's if you're looking for just an awesome experience which you can keep on going back to and playing over and over again, is Diddy Kong Racing. Also for either testing your skills and trying to hone them and getting faster at the courses, or even trying out battle mode and not actually being able to play against people, versus having to actually find someone to play against in the battle mode in Mario Kart 64. Now, when we go into multiplayer mode, I will say that if I'm, like I said before, if I'm at a party or with friends, I'm still reaching for Mario Kart 64 first for the battle mode if we have 4 people. But if there's only 2 of us or less, I'm probably going to Diddy Kong Racing because of the selection of options and just a wide range of what you can do within those battle modes. It really adds to the factor. I truly think that if Diddy Kong Racing had been more, what's a good way for this? He'd been more commercially advertised as being having a wider range of options and being as fun as it is to play, it might have been more of a success. I mean, still 8th overall for Nintendo 64 is pretty darn amazing. But when we go back and look at it, like I kind of have to give multiplayer mode up to Mario Kart 64. But overall, I will 100% admit that if I'm going back to one of these games on average, I'm probably going back to Diddy Kong Racing. And I know I'm wearing Mario Kart shirt, but it's good to go through this type of kind of like that versus that because we can really find out in the end which game ran supreme in our household. And this by no means doesn't mean that I'm never going to stop playing or I'm going to stop playing Mario Kart 64, but it does open my eyes to how great of a game Diddy Kong Racing was.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, right? Diddy Kong Racing doesn't really exist other than this game.
Yes.
And that makes it really tough to when you
there was a DS remake, but like I prefer the original.
Yeah, the DS remake. But honestly, that's what it comes down to is that outside of like this game or the DS remake, it doesn't really exist anymore. And I think that's why everybody is always leaning towards Mario Kart 64. And just that it has a lot of new fun features and iconic levels. But for me, overall, and I think both of us, we're going to say that Diddy Kong Racing
reigns supreme in our household. And with that, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching our awesome collaboration today. I got to say, this is probably my most fun collaboration to date. I can 100% admit when I'm wrong. I'm still going to play Mario Kart 64 and try to beat those ghost times. Trust me. I'm still a huge Mario fan, but going through this process makes me realize I need to go back to Diddy Kong Racing and unlock Adventure 2. Like I've only seen videos on it so far, so I may have to call up the completionist and ask him how he does it. All right, so I want to make sure that we give a shout out to everyone who watched today. Thank you so much for watching. I can confidently say this has been my most fun collaboration to date. I owe it all to my beautiful wife in going over these 2 amazing games. And just remember,
damn, it feels good to be a gamer.
All right, have a great rest of your holidays, everyone. Bye.
Bye.